This is the Conservative American Message, hosted by the one, the only, Cam Lau. Today I'm joined by Brad Sherman. He is a pastor and former state representative who I would say is probably the current frontrunner in the Iowa governor's race. I do want to note that this conversation took place before current Governor Kim Reynolds announced this week that she will not be seeking re-election. So that leaves Brad as the only declared candidate at this point that I know of. Before we get into it, please remember to leave a 5-star rating wherever you listen, as this really helps us to get high-caliber guests like Brad on this show. Thanks for listening and enjoy. If you just want to start off by kind of telling about your career and what you've done prior to getting involved in politics, and especially prior to running for office originally.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Well, I grew up running heavy equipment. My dad had an excavating company, and so I grew up driving bulldozers, and we did our own repair work. So I was kind of a repair mechanic kind of guy. That was what I grew up doing, driving dozers and drag lines. A lot of folks don't even know what a drag line is anymore. Those are cable operated excavators, really is what they are. So we did a lot of work for farm equipment, for farmers, and farm drainage work and that sort of thing. And then I worked a little while on a Mississippi River. It was a riverboat. Put up some prefabricated steel buildings, did a little bit of that. But then in 1974, I met my wife, and I met her on the same night that I surrendered my life to Jesus Christ, and we began walking together, following Him. We've been doing that ever since. And so, and then while I was working as a heavy equipment mechanic for somebody else other than my father, we started doing ministry training. So we finished our ministry training. We came to Iowa. Where I grew up was in southeast Missouri. And so we came and we started a church at the University of Iowa. I pastored for a year in Missouri before we moved here, and then we started a church at the University of Iowa, and a campus-based church. And so when we got to the University of Iowa, that's when we really saw what was happening at our university campuses. I knew a little bit about it, but there was Marxism, socialism, a lot of what we call today as a woke culture was there all the way back in 1981. And wow. So that they've been basically promoting that sort of thing all through for the last few decades. And so it's developed into what we see happening in our culture today. So I started doing what I call biblical worldview seminars and teaching about the founding principles of America. Got very interested in America's history, and maybe you've heard of David Barton or Bill Federer or some of those folks who teach a lot on that topic. Those were big inspirations to me. So anyway, that's how we got to Iowa, and I've been involved in politics. Pretty much since then. I started getting involved in local party work. I led caucuses. I've been a county chair delegates to the district and state conventions, and then also the national convention. And so that's been what brought us up here. Then in 2021, I decided to run for state house, and so we ran that. We had a 6-way primary. They redrew the lines, in the district. So the way the lines were drawn, we had no incumbent in this district where I live right now. It just happened to turn out that way. So we got involved in that race, and I went. We had a 6-way primary. I think there was one other race in the state that had a 5-way primary during that time, but we had 6 people all trying to win, the state house primary. So. But we were able to win that with 55.5%. So that was a big win for us. And then we went on and won the general election. And so I served in the state house from in 2023 and 2024. So that's how I got involved in politics. And being in the State House for a couple of years, you get a pretty good you get a good look under the hood, as they say, and you see what's going on up there. And so it's really my passion to to just bring our not only our state, but maybe even influence the nation. If our state has an influence on the nation, so that I tend to think along those lines, that we see the founding principles restored back to our back to our educational systems, back to the common knowledge of our population, because we have a huge part of our population that just doesn't understand the foundational principles. George Mason, who is known as the father of the Bill of Rights, there's a quote by him that it's engraved in granite up by the Capitol building in Des Moines, and that quote says, if free people do not examine their liberties and how they were obtained, they risk losing these rights. And so I think that's what's happened. People have forgotten exactly how we had achieved our liberties. And so the good starting place to begin learning that is, understanding the Declaration of Independence, reading through the Constitution, and realizing when you do that, you realize that, we're not following that very closely. And if we would, I think we'd be a lot better off as a nation. And so, and I think there has been an effort by, I don't know, what do you call them, the deep state? I don't know. A lot of people think that's a conspiracy theory thing, but I have a friend who said, I need some new conspiracy theories because my old ones all came true. So it's kind of a funny phrase, but there's a lot of truth to it. Obviously, some things are far out, and you got to be careful what you believe. I understand that, but there really is a group of people who don't like our Constitution. They don't believe in America, and they've been out to destroy it. And it's become very obvious in the past, few years that that's the battle we're fighting. And so we can go on, and then I didn't run for State House again, and I don't know if I told you this, Cam, but in 2023, I had a daughter who lived up near Algona, who passed away unexpectedly, suddenly, and left four children without a mother. And so we made plans to move there to be close to those grandkids and to help out with that. So because of that, I couldn't run again for the same district. And so I recruited a guy to run in my place, and he started campaigning and was doing pretty well. And then our plans changed, and turns out we're not moving after all. But by that time, he was already campaigning, so I couldn't go back on him. So after that, I told people I wasn't running again, and people started saying to me, "You should run for governor. You should run for governor." And we started praying, and so now we're at the point where we feel like this is just a calling. It was one of those things that became so clear. I don't think anybody has a direct understanding or ability to hear God every single moment. Sometimes we feel like God's showing us something, but in this case, it's absolutely clear that it's been confirmed so many times, I have no doubt about it, that this is a calling from God to run for governor. So that's what we're doing. We had a statewide press release that we dropped in February 17th, and then on the 22nd we had our kickoff event up in Mason City, and so now we've been visiting different places, and that's where I ran into you up there. See, what county was that? Hancock County, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So that's brings us up to speed. So I'll stop and maybe take a breath here, and maybe you have more questions you could ask.
Yeah. Well, along with that, obviously you're a Christian, Bible-believing, faithful man, and kind of what are some of the personal values that guide your decision making on a lot of different issues?
Well, I think it takes when it comes to government, there are several principles that I think are the things that I would refer to as foundations. On our website we have a tagline that says "Restoring the Foundations of Freedom," and that really is what this campaign is all about. And that's what I hope to accomplish as governor, is to influence the state in that way. We can't force anybody to be Christians, and we certainly don't want to be. That wouldn't be correct. That wouldn't be Christianity at all. But at the same time, we don't want to be those who are intimidated or afraid to talk about God, because our founding documents were very clearly talking about God, and so that those values of just being biblical according to those principles, just like creation, for instance, our Declaration of Independence says we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. And so, right there, the founding documents of our nation say that we have a Creator, a God, and that our rights come from God. And, it goes on and says that among these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and to secure these rights, governments are instituted. So we have within the Declaration of Independence right there a philosophy of American government which says that there's a God and rights come from God. He gives these rights to us, and it's something that's a gift from God. And the purpose of government is to secure those rights. Now, I've done some surveys. I wrote a little book I call it the Freedom Quiz, and one of the questions that I asked was, it was a true-false question. It says that, and the statement was this, that our founders established a government that would give certain unalienable rights to its citizens. True or false? And you'd be surprised how many people say true, but it's really false, because our government isn't the one that gave us unalienable rights. It was God. And so I think that principle alone is huge. That's a guiding principle for me. I think that governs a lot of, that applies to a lot of things. Another big principle for me, a guiding principle, is decentralization. And, I could go into the whole detail where that comes out of the Bible. I mean, even our Constitution was structured after Isaiah 33:22, which talks about our judge, our lawgiver, and our king. And so that's why we have three branches of government, separation of powers. But decentralization is a very big principle. I believe in smaller government, not bigger government. I believe in self-government, because when people have the right principles inside of their heart, well, then they will naturally do the right thing, and they don't need laws and big government to force them into that. And so this principle of governing ourselves, or having self-control based on the principles that we find in the Scriptures, just take the Ten Commandments. You shall not kill, you shall love the Lord your God, you honor your parents, you shall do not steal, do not covet. All these principles are good moral principles that are very important for us to follow if we're going to have a free society and a blessed society. So, but decentralization is a principle that applies to how we do government. But if we don't govern ourselves properly, somebody will always rise up and government will get bigger just for the sake of keeping order and peace in a culture. So the more crime increases, for instance, which is the lack of self-government, the more police officers we need, the more government, the more patrols, the more laws. I mean, sometimes after spending time in the State House, I think we make way too many laws already, but part of that is due to the fact that people don't do the right thing. And so we have to try to fix it legally, and it never works completely well, but we do the best we can. So that's the first thing that comes to my mind when you ask that question. So,
yeah. Well, so taking some of those values and stuff, I guess there's some topics that I think are really hot topics right now in the state, and especially stuff that I hear about among younger people around my age. I've heard you talk a little bit about some different ideas around taxation and how we can make that more fair for people, whether it be state income tax or even property taxes. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on taxation.
Well, I think first off, in general, I believe taxation it really robs our liberty, and the more taxation we have, the less liberty we have. That's one of those unalienable rights. But we didn't even have income tax until 1916, and we didn't even have, I forget when property taxes became a thing, but it wasn't a thing either. Most of the financing for our governments and what have you were achieved through sales taxes and tariffs, and that's one of the things that President Trump's doing again now is tariffs. Of course, it's a big battle, it's a big fight, but so that's the foundational thing. First off, I'd like to see a way where we're not taxed anymore. I don't think that's realistic right now, of course, but we need to look for ways to continue to reduce taxes. One of the big ones right now that everyone seems to be concerned about is property taxes. I know my property taxes have gone up significantly, and we tried to do some things in the legislature a couple of years ago to fix that and try to keep property taxes down. So then you have the county supervisors who don't have the money to accomplish what they want to accomplish, especially some of the smaller counties. I mean, some of the smaller counties especially are doing a really good job. They're being frugal. They're doing everything they can. And so then this cap on how much property taxes can be raised really hurts them. So that's an issue. But on the other side of it are the people that pay the property tax, and they're saying, I just can't afford this, can't do it. So it's not an easy. There's no easy answer to this. I think a lot of it has to do with management. Some of the bigger counties are doing okay, but the property taxes still go up. So I think we can find ways to address it. One of the ideas that I have floated out there is to find a way to make our property tax for our primary residence tax-free. I've been looking into that. I can't make any promises on that, but because there are a lot of questions that have to be answered yet. But I believe that there's a principle here that, we work all of our lives sometimes to pay off our mortgage. Then when we pay our mortgage off on our home or principal residence, then we still have to rent it from the government and pay a significant property tax. I think I read somewhere the average property tax on homes is around $4,500 a year, $4,100 a year, something like that. And so especially if you are a retired person on a fixed income, that's a significant chunk of money. And if taxes keep going up, that becomes undoable sometimes. So I think if we had a way for at least for seniors, we could start there. If you've lived in the state for 10 years, which means you have invested into the state, you've paid sales taxes, you've paid property taxes, then maybe we could find a way to make that primary residence tax-free. And if we did that, I think people would stay in Iowa instead of move away to a warmer climate. I think more people might stay closer to their parents. When their parents retire, they would stay around, be close. I think it could really increase our population and help that. So those are some thoughts I have on property tax. I wish I had all the answers, but I don't. I don't think anybody does. But I do have some people that I've been talking to who some really good minds, and I think we can come up with some ideas. But it's something that the legislature, and it's not something a governor can just do. You just can't walk in there and flip a switch and fix these things. That would be the function of a dictator, and that's not what the governor's office is. The governor has to work with the legislature, the Senate, and the House, and then we have to make laws and enact them, and they have to be constitutional. So there's a lot to this, but I am convinced that God's blessing is a big part of this, and if we just begin inserting Him back into the equation, it's going to make a lot of things better. And that's where we get back to the whole issue of self-government and smaller government, but that doesn't need so much money. Something that can't be fixed overnight.
Yeah, definitely. So that kind of goes into the next thing I was going to say about, how can we make Iowa a more attractive state? There's a lot of workforce shortages, when you look at agriculture and manufacturing and some of these big industries in Iowa that we just can't find help. And so what are some ways we can attract people to this state?
Well, that would be one. Again, none of these things are going to be an overnight fix, but the smaller our tax burden is, the better. Another thing I would really like to do is find ways to revitalize the rural communities. and restore the family farm. It seems very sad to me that so many family farms are disappearing. And I don't have anything against the big farmers, but Iowa used to have lots of family farms, and some of those, of course, are big. But if we can find a way to restore that and make that attractive, then we could start these industries, smaller industries, be attractive to more business on a more rural level. I mean, there's something about rural living that is very attractive to a lot of people. We just have to provide the infrastructure and everything that's needed, like high-speed internet, for instance. If we're going to have to make rural communities competitive with some of the bigger cities and areas, they need to be able to access the internet and have the same communication tools that we find in the cities. Now, I know there's been some progress on that, and that's been good, but I think we've got a long ways to go still on that, because that's one thing. And also, I'm very interested in the idea of smaller farms that can support a family, particularly when it comes to organic farming or farming that's really based on nutrition. I mean, a lot of our farming is based on more of an industrial type approach with the ethanol industry and all that, and that's good. We want to support those industries and make sure they are viable and have the markets for them and all that. But when it comes to nutrition, some of the industrial type crops that we grow are not primarily for our nutritional value, and so if they're organic, they're going to be a lot more attractive to that. Organic crops draw or demand a much higher premium for the crops as well. So that's something that I think could be looked into as well.
So I know a lot of people that are upset about education in the state of Iowa, and I think there's just a lot of loud voices. Clearly, the voters of Iowa continue to choose what has been done. You were in the House when the Students First Act was passed, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I was. I know we passed some education bills. I'm not sure I don't remember that particular title to it, though.
I think was that the one where the ESAs were put into effect, or maybe it was a different name to it, but yeah. So, that's been a huge controversy, and people are very upset about it and very vocal, but how do you think we should tackle education, and is there room for both public and private schools in the state?
I absolutely do think there is. Now, the Educational Savings Account, ESA, a lot of people call them vouchers, and there was a lot of misinformation when that went through. It's not really a voucher system. A voucher, it's basically like a money order that you get, is what a voucher is, and you can go spend it however you want. But this ESA is not a voucher system at all. I know a lot of people call it that. It's a savings account for each individual child, and it stays in the state's hands. There's a very specific amount of a narrow and specific band of products like tuition and textbooks and things like that can pay for, and so requisitions are sent in. If a parent chooses to put their children in a private school, then they go to the school. They can get the tuition paid out of that account. They can do textbooks, a few other things out of there. But the amount, like I think in Iowa, I think the state puts around $7,000 per student per year, and then if you add the federal funds in, it's more than that. It's quite a bit more. I don't have the numbers in front of me right now. So the amount of money that went into the savings account was a very, very small portion of that, and so a lot of the money still went to the public school system. I think the thing that people forget is that this is tax money that people pay for their children to go to school. And so yet many parents feel like they have not been getting the education that they're paying for with their tax money. And so that's a valid concern. And so to have a choice on this, I think, is the American way. Now, a lot of people are upset, and I understand why, because, schools, and some of them run very tight budgets, and so when you take a little bit of money away, they're hurting. But when it comes to the woke culture that we're into, I know one school district near me had 7 full-time DEI directors. I mean, if you count their salaries and their benefits and everything else that comes with it, I mean, I don't know what you're looking at there, probably at least $1 million a year right there. Mm-hmm. And so this was nothing. DEI, in my opinion, is just promoting racism. And so that's what President Trump has been outlawing. And so there are a lot of things like that parents are upset with. I know in one school district, the administration was saying that their parents didn't have the right to know what was going on with their children in the school. Now, they got sued over it, and they lost the lawsuit. But I'm just saying, these are the kind of things, I mean, they were protecting kids from, or preventing children from telling their parents and preventing parents from knowing that their children were being indoctrinated or were thinking about a transgender type lifestyle. But the problem is that in many cases, these kids probably wouldn't even be thinking about that had it not been something that was talked about at school in the first place. And so I have no problem with people taking their children out of public schools, if they don't feel like that's an environment where their children ought to be. That is freedom in America, and I will protect that as long as I can, whenever I can, to my last breath, because these are the things that make us free as a nation. And the more, and that goes back to the whole centralization thing. Centralized education, centralized government, all these things always seem to get rotten when you centralize it. But when you break it down, you got a lot more people thinking about it. You have a lot more perspectives, a lot more ideas, a lot more people having input. And so local is always better. But so there's a lot to fix in education. A lot of it has to do with our curriculum, and which promotes some of these ideas that people disagree with. I know parents. I've talked to parents who are absolutely shocked when they actually dig into it and find out what their children are being taught. And so, if there's just a lot of things to consider there. So, yeah. Education. There's a quote by Thomas Jefferson. If I can remember it, I'll try to do my best here. But it says, I know of no safe depositor of the ultimate powers of a society but the people themselves. And if we think them not capable of exercising their control with a wholesome discretion, the remedy is not to take it from them, but to inform their discretion by education. And he said this is the true correction for constitutional abuse, or abuses of our constitutional power. So he was saying, if we don't think the people are capable of making decisions, and that's the attitude that we see in some situations, particularly when it comes to educators. The academics think they just have it all figured out, and the rest of us aren't too smart. And sometimes we have people that maybe don't understand what's going on, but the remedy to fix that is not to just say, well, we need to tell you what to do. The remedy is to educate people. That's what Thomas Jefferson believed, and I think it's a very, very good point. We have to make sure that people get the right kind of education, and when we do that, it's going to produce a much better society. I would like to see our public schools making all their parents happy, and I think if we do that, there would be a lot better outcome. Another thing with education too, I've seen the charts. There's a line graph that I have, and the number of students were increasing very slightly, and then the number of teachers for the students was increasing right almost parallel with that incline for the students. And then we had the next line on the graph was the number of administrators in the schools, and that line went almost up like this. it was amazing how many more administrators we have now per student than we used to have. And so I think that's something that really needs to be looked into. I think we have way too many administrators, and we need to restore authority to the teachers and give them the authority to restore discipline. I think discipline in the public schools is a big issue. I've talked to teachers who have been bitten, who have been punched, who are almost afraid to go to school anymore. And then when they try to talk to the parents about it, they get blamed for it. And so we've got a situation in some school districts that's just almost unlivable, for the teachers. And so it's a hard situation for them. So again, these are not easy issues to solve, but I think if we start showing what they are and putting the right information there, and I've been building a team of people that have some really good ideas on these issues. And so we're not against public education at all. We need it, and we want to make it the best it is. Iowa used to be top in the nation in public education, and now we're in the middle of the pack. And then America as a whole is way down the list in terms of education. I talked to an educator just a few days or a week or so ago, and they said that she's a tutoring person. And she said that she sees straight A students come in sometimes out of the public school system, and when she starts to work with them on a certain area to get them ready for college or something, now she finds out they're like sometimes 3 and 4 years behind. And so there's a lot of that sort of thing going on. So it's the first step to solving these problems is admitting that they are there. And I think what's happening in our culture is people are not admitting that they are there. I know a lot of legislators who will honestly admit what our problems are, but I also hear some that, and government officials, it seems like all they ever want to do is just brag about all the good things we did and never want to address the real issues. And so that's why one of my promises is that I don't know everything, and if I make a mistake, I'm gonna admit it and own up to it. Because there's a lot of fixing that needs to be done. I don't think anybody has all the answers. And so, but we're gonna dive in and work on getting them fixed.
Well, I think definitely the Iowa GOP, including yourself and your time in the Iowa House, has made a lot of good progress. But like you said, there's always a lot more we can do.
Yeah.
And all of those things I think are going to continue to improve as the GOP is still in control in Iowa. But there is one issue, and I'm sure you know what I'm about to say, that it seems like the Iowa GOP is not concerned with whatsoever. And this is the one issue I would think that any primary challenger you might have would have a different stance than you. And as of now, I think you're the only Republican candidate declared at this time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So yeah, but eminent domain and this whole thing with the carbon capture pipeline has been a huge topic that a lot of people are talking about, yet nobody's talking about. And so I'd like to hear about your thoughts on protecting private property rights and just carbon capture.
Okay, well, I hope you can hear me. Your screen froze on me there. I still see it looks like I'm registering on the microphone there, so I'll just jump into the eminent domain thing then, and I guess if it turns out you're not hearing me, we can always back up and do it again. But yeah, right now I am the only declared candidate. I know when I decided that this was a calling to do this and run, I did call Governor Reynolds. I told her I was going to be running. I thought that was a respectable thing to do. I know there's a lot that she's done in this state that I think has been good, but eminent domain is one of the things where it seems like we're on the different page. Eminent domain for the carbon capture pipeline specifically is what we're talking about here. The carbon capture pipeline, first off, it is a private company. It's not a public utility. The CO2 is not one of those public utilities like gas or electric or something like that. that everyone needs to have infrastructure to send it to their house. It's an industrial commodity, and this is all based around a private company. And so the Iowa Constitution is pretty clear that you don't use eminent domain for that. And so so that's a big issue. Then you go into the whole issue of how different a pipeline this actually is. It's not like a natural gas pipeline or a petroleum pipeline or anything like that. This liquefied carbon dioxide is reduced to almost to a liquid state, and it's at about 2,000 or between 2,000 and 3,000 pounds per square inch. Maybe there's different numbers on that. But if that was ever to rupture, the carbon dioxide is heavier than air. It lays on the ground, it spreads out, and the kill zone is huge on something like that. It displaces all the air, all the breathable air, all the oxygen is gone. Anything that lives in that area that's an oxygen breathing organism will die. And first responders wouldn't even be able to help. They can't, because you wouldn't be able to drive a car into the area, because car engines and truck engines won't run if there's no oxygen. So there's so many problems with this CO2 thing. I mean, I personally believe that that CO2 it's being promoted as some kind of harmful gas to our atmosphere, which in reality, I've talked to some of the top scientists around the nation, and it's just a scam. The CO2 is not a pollutant. It's not hurting our atmosphere. In fact, it makes the plants grow better when we have more CO2. I spoke with I went to a conference out in Denver, an energy conference, and spoke with some scientists, and they were telling us that the current level of CO2 in our atmosphere, at least at that time, was about 420 parts per million. But the optimal level in the atmosphere for plant growth is from 400 to 1,200 parts per million. So we're nowhere near anything that's going to hurt our atmosphere. And when you stop and think about it, when CO2 is higher, the plants grow quicker, and they produce more oxygen because they're growing quicker, because they take in the CO2, they produce oxygen, and so it's kind of a self-balancing system when you stop and think about it. And in fact, I had one of the top scientists from one of our state universities tell me that he said there's absolutely nothing that humans can do, in his opinion, that will produce enough carbon dioxide that's going to be detrimental to the planet. He said, however, I can't say that or I would lose my job. And that's what we've gotten to. And I brought that up at a meeting in Des Moines one time, and the people in the room kind of gasped when I said that, because it was all about this energy and the green, making sure we save the planet by, capturing the CO2. And so, but that's where we've gotten to. We've gotten to there's a political agenda behind this, environmental movement. Now, I believe in protecting the environment as much as the next person. I mean, I'm very concerned about our streams and the amount of chemicals that are in our streams. I mean, we have warnings that go out about not swimming in certain lakes at certain times of the year. We're told sometimes don't eat the fish. If you catch a fish in the river, don't eat it because it might have toxic chemicals in it. These are things that are really concerning. I think we need to find ways to fix that. So I am very much in favor of clean air, clean water. But CO2, that's a whole different issue. That's not the problem. Carbon monoxide from car exhaust, that's something we should be concerned about. But CO2, not a problem. And so this is all designed to promote somebody's business plan. And, we just have to, that's not what government's for. And that's why I don't know any details. I don't have any proof of anything. But it sure seems like that big campaign donations sometimes, have an effect on these sort of things. And so that's why one of my promises is that I won't be bought. Government's not for sale. I'm not in this, to get rich. I gave up on being rich a long time ago. I'm not rich. So, so, and I'm far enough along in life. I think I'll be just fine. So this is about my grandchildren, about the next generation, that they don't lose the freedoms that we have, because I care about the future, and that is the reason that I'm doing this.
So, have you ever personally been asked by party leadership or any kind of donors to do something to compromise your principles?
Well, I can say that I was asked to endorse a candidate, and it's never out in the open. It's always subtle. But I was asked to endorse a candidate, and and it was also a known factor that everybody who made this endorsement was getting a $5,000 to $10,000 check for their campaign. I did not endorse that candidate, and I did not get a check. So it had nothing to do with my conservative values. It had to do with whether I would be endorse a certain candidate. And so that's what goes on, and that goes on in politics. It's not just a one-party problem. And this is the kind of stuff that I think that really gives politics a bad name, and it's just not right. There's a lot of money that changes hands and that influences, who gets positions and recognition and that sort of thing. This stuff needs to be cleaned up. And I'm not going to participate in it. And that's why my campaign is a truly a grassroots campaign. Of course we're raising money. We have to have some money, and we're looking. We appreciate every donation, whether it's $1 or $10 or $1,000 or 50 or 100,000. We appreciate. I'm not going to turn away any of the big donors, but every donor should understand no amount of money is going to influence me to do what is not right, what's something that's wrong. And so that's how I've lived my entire life, and I'm not going to change now. So.
Do you think there's any Republican lawmakers or party leadership people down in Des Moines that might give you a hard time, not work very well with you if you were the governor?
Well, there's always some of that goes on because people have lots of different views. I'm not going to assume that. I will assume that when you have a different view, you're going to butt heads on things, and you get together and you hammer out something you think is going to be best for the state. What I'm talking about is if you take that money influencing factor out of it, it's going to cause all that to work a lot better. And so I'm not going to point fingers at anybody and say, well, this person, I have some opinions about people. It seems to me that some people are more moderate or, I guess you would call rhino type people based on some of the positions they take. But when it comes to leadership, I think, in 2026, after the election, and I'm the governor, I don't know who the leadership's going to be at that point. We don't know that for sure. So I'm not gonna stick my finger in anybody's eye. I want to get along with people, and hopefully I can influence people that maybe don't have the same convictions I have to have those kind of convictions. Because this is going to be that's what leadership does. You try to work with people where you can, and you don't just go around making enemies. That's not going to get anything done. So, but you can communicate with people and talk to people, and that doesn't mean you're compromising. I think it's pretty funny how as soon as President Trump talks to Putin, for instance, they think he's a Russian sympathizer. Well, that doesn't mean anything. That means you're trying to prevent a war. You're trying to make something good happen. But it never works to just sull up and take your ball and go home and say, I'm not going to talk to you. That doesn't help a thing. So, we have to be that kind of people, and that's the way government. That's one of the key aspects that makes government work. I think it's good communication.
Yeah. So like we said, we don't know who or if you'll be challenged in the Republican primary or what's going to happen yet. But you were a very early endorser of President Trump. Do you think that there's potential that President Trump might tip the scale in your favor?
Well, I hope so. I have spoken with him on a few occasions. Um, I've opened his rallies with prayer a couple of times. Prayed with him personally backstage. Well, not personally, but just a small group of us praying for him, and I led that prayer before he came out to the stage. Um, he did give me a call when my daughter passed away, personal call. I had a voicemail from him, and he said, call anytime. He said, I'm so sorry. And so what I did was I thought, well, I'm going to call the number back and just tell him thank you at least. Maybe someone will connect me to him. Well, when I called that number back, he picked up. It was his phone, I guess. And so we had a good conversation, and I found him to be a very compassionate, real individual who I think he genuinely cares for people. There's all kinds of stories out there that he doesn't promote about how he helps people. And so I appreciate him for that. Now, whether he I'm just saying that to say that, yeah, there's a little bit of a relationship there. I know some of the people in the campaign. Um, I hope he will endorse me. I would love to have his endorsement. But I think we need to show viability first. I'm sure he's looking at that. He doesn't know me that well, and he's a pretty busy guy. You just can't go knock on his door and say, hey, let's sit down and have a chat. But that's why we're working hard right now. We're working hard to raise funds. That's one way we show liability. We're working hard to find people in the local area here in the state that endorse. We've got some good like Sam Clovis has endorsed me over in western Iowa. He was in the Trump administration. I've got several legislators have indicated that they're going to do the same. And I've got a couple of people on the national level that are going to endorse this. Mike Huckabee endorsed me for my House race. I don't know that he can do that now, being an ambassador, to Israel. That's probably not going to happen. But he is a good friend, and I think the fact that he endorsed me for a House race is a positive one. And so we haven't really pursued a lot of endorsements yet, but we're going to get busy on that and start sticking those on our website here pretty soon. And but yeah, I'm looking for President Trump's endorsement. I hope to get it.
Yeah,
but
that'd be awesome.
But I know that, like I said earlier, I know that this is a calling that I'm doing here, and so it doesn't hinge on that. But it would certainly be nice.
Yeah. So what can people do to help you out at this point? You talked about fundraising goals and stuff, and your website, if you want to kind of point that out to people, and then kind of explain the process of the primary and when that will be and how people can support you that way.
Yeah. Okay, well, for as far as helping us out, just spread the word. If you like what you're hearing from me, tell people about it. That's one of the best. That's a personal endorsement right there. Every time somebody that is behind me goes and tells someone, they're endorsing me to that person. And I've got a lot of good friends around the state that are doing that. And so just telling friends. I would encourage people to go to the website, and we've got, it's pretty basic information there. It tells a little bit about me, but, like this interview, for instance, will be much more detailed than what you'll see on the website. But we still encourage people to go on the website. A few of the key principles and positions are there. Encourage people to sign up on the website and say you want to be a volunteer. Now, we don't get the opportunity to reply to everybody quickly, but we will get to it. Especially, some people ask for a reply and others don't. But those that ask for reply, we're going to get a reply to them, and then also we're going to one of the options on when you sign up on the website is, do you want to volunteer and help out? And if that's the case, then we will get in touch and find out the best way that each individual can help, because everybody has different ways they can help. But one of the ways is to help us gather petitions, and we can send out nomination sheets. To run for governor, we have to have a minimum of 100 signatures from registered voters in at least 19 counties. 19 different counties. Now, and then, so that's only 1,900 signatures. We need a total of 3,500, and but at least there has to be that many from at least 19 counties. And so we're going to go for double that, at least, and we're going to go for 200 or 300 from at least 19 counties, and then we're going to go for 7,000 signatures total. So there's a lot of work to be done there. So because if you don't have those signatures, you can't get on the ballot in the primary. So that's very crucial to do that. And then, of course, making donations. Anything helps. We appreciate that. And like I say, the more strength we show in that area, the more I think there are a lot of donors out there that like the message, but they feel like they want to feel confident that they're making a good investment for something that's valuable. So the more strength we can show, the better. So that's some of the basics things that people can do to help. We're also putting together a volunteer e-pack. I'm calling it that. It's not ready yet, but anybody that says they want to volunteer, we'll send that package out to them. It'll be a PDF document with a whole bunch of stuff in it that people can do, and they can choose what they feel like would be best, and then we'll have a volunteer or a staff member get in touch with them to coach them along how to do it. Social media is another one. People, if you see our post on Facebook, and that's really about all we're doing right now, maybe a little bit of X, and we might expand that later, but right now we're just basically on Facebook. But if you see our posts on Facebook, share it with your friends. That everybody that shares it reaches out to a whole new segment of people. So not a whole new segment, there's a lot of overlap, but still it reaches people that haven't been reached yet. And then if you want us to come to your community, we can come. We can do a house party, call it that, or whatever you want to call it. But it's get a few people together and sit around a kitchen table, talk about the issues, kind of like we're doing here today, or put together a little meeting. Throw some hot dogs on the grill and have do something when the weather's nice. This summer would be a great time to do that. We've got meetings scheduled already, and we're going to be scheduling a lot more around the state. I know up in your part of the country, we're going to be doing the Red, White, Blue, and You event. I forget the date on that one, but you probably know. But it's coming up.
Yeah.
And so we're going to be visiting every county, and we hope to get that done this summer, by the end of this summer, and then we're going to be continuing to visit some of them, obviously more than once. And so we're going to every event, every patriot group, every freedom-loving group we can. I've had a couple churches invite us. That's one of the things that a lot of churches steer clear of politics, but there are some out there that they're starting to realize more and more all the time that it's the Christian voices that are a very important part of our government, and that was part of our founding, and it needs to become true again. We don't want to freeze out everybody else, but we certainly should have our own voice as well. So we didn't give up when we became Christians, we didn't give up our freedom of speech.
Yeah. So all that's available, information and stuff, is that at shermanforiowa.com?
That's right, shermanforiowa.com. Okay. And there was another part of that question. Maybe I didn't answer. I forget what.
Yeah. So I was also going to ask you about when is the primary for the Gubernatorial, and how can people vote and support you in that way?
Well, the primary is coming up June the 2nd of 26, so it's a little over a year away. As you mentioned earlier, we've started early because we want to make this a real grassroots. We want to talk to as many people face-to-face as we can, and share the message that we're promoting. I expect there are other issues that are going to come up along the way, and so we want to get out and hear about those issues from people. Not only do we want to go and give our message, we want to hear what's on people's hearts as well and what's on their minds. There are a lot of problems that need to be solved, and the answers to those problems, I believe, are out there in the grassroots. And government has an important part to answer those problems, but it's really it's the people that are going to provide the solutions. they're the people are the ones that work every day. They're the ones that pay taxes. They're the ones that get ideas. They're the ones that invest in businesses. And so the job of government is to create a level playing field and to make a friendly environment for business, for growth, and then get out of the way and let people do it. So that's kind of the basics of what I believe on that. But June the 2nd, 2026, it will be the primary. And I would also add that the primaries are very, very important. A lot of people don't get too involved and they wait till the general election to get involved. But by that time, sometimes it's too late. I'm not trying to accuse anybody here, but I know that one of the tactics of if you call it the establishment, or I don't know, people that think that they should be the ones that pick who gets to be in office. There's a group of people behind the scenes that don't think that we should run in the primary if we have a sitting Republican. And well, I don't buy that, because how do we get any better if we take that attitude? And I've seen some of our Republicans. Well, let me just put it this way. Sometimes it feels like I know we have a Republican majority, but sometimes it doesn't feel like we have a conservative majority. And those are two different things. And so everybody doesn't have to believe the same thing, but there's certain key values that we should have. We've got a very strong platform, Iowa platform, for the Republican Party. I think our elected officials would do good to read it and align themselves with it. That platform was built from the ground up, from caucus night all the way through state convention, county by county, district by district, all the way to the state convention. And this is the voice of the people. And that's one of the important things about the caucus system. So and then that's another point. Early in 26 will be the Iowa caucuses, and it's an off year, so it's usually a lower turnout. But I would encourage people to start planning now for the caucus. If you're willing to be a precinct leader, do that. I know I was a county chair for several years, and we always had trouble finding people to lead a precinct caucus. But this is grassroots politics. And that's why the Iowa caucus is an important thing. We don't want to lose that. We want to keep it going. We want it to be better, because it's real people getting out there and talking to the candidates face to face, and it's one of the ways that people make their voices heard. A lot of people don't realize that the caucus, on presidential years, people come in, they flock into the caucus, they do the straw poll vote, and they see who the pick for president is in the straw poll, and then they go home. But there's so much more. There's so much more that happens at a caucus, and many folks don't understand that or realize it, because the caucus you elect precinct leaders, and those become 2 for each precinct. Those become the members of the Republican Central Committee then, and many of our Republican organizations around the state don't even have a full slate of Central Committee members, and so we have to add members at large sometimes, just to have people to get things done. And so getting involved in the Republican Party is a very good thing. Now, I know some people say, well, I don't like the Republican Party. I don't like what they're doing and this and that. Well, that's a very good reason to be involved then, because we the people have the say. So we can get involved on a local level, and then we can have a say about how things turn out.
Well, that was my conversation with Brad Sherman, hopefully the future governor of Iowa. And I gotta say that, especially in light of Governor Reynolds' announcement this last week, I implore you guys to consider getting involved and helping Brad, because we all know the Iowa GOP establishment will almost certainly not let him go to the primary unchallenged. He needs our support now if we are to continue to prosper in this great state, and for the sake of the Iowa GOP. He has my endorsement, so I hope you will show him your support as well. But at any rate, were you offended by this podcast? Good. Thanks for listening, guys. I really appreciate you all. Have a great week, and stay conservative.